You're watching KMNH, Kids Making the News Happen.
Hi, I'm Omer and you're watching KMNH, Kids Making the News Happen. It's Friday, March 22nd, and our first day of summer vacation. I just want to publicly thank everyone for just getting through this school year. My parents and family, my teachers and their families, my friends, and of course you, our fans. And congratulations to all my peers for not giving up this year. One of the things that I've learned is responsibility. In many cases, students, like myself, learned an available lesson that we need to be able to lead ourselves. Through projects, papers, and just making sure that assignments are completed. Without a teacher looking over our shoulders and parents not able to check in all the time because of their own work needs, it was up to us to get it done. Maybe this is the most important thing that students learned this year, that it is really up to us to want to learn and figure things out, and how to manage our own schedule. Like how to share the computer with our brothers and sisters and parents who need to work. Or taking the time to figure out something and research instead of just being able to raise your hand in the classroom and get an answer. We learn to lead ourselves through assignments, to manage our time and find ways to stay focused. At first, we all probably realized how easy it is to fall behind, and the work that needs to get done to catch up and stay on track. So then, maybe the most important thing we learned this school year is to be independent, to take on the responsibility to lead ourselves, and to be ready when the time comes to lead others.
If you haven't noticed, many celebrities, such as Omer and myself, support their sponsors through product placement. Product placement is a form of subtle advertising where instead of breaking away to a commercial in the middle of a broadcast, the product is actually a part of the show. Like if a celebrity wears a certain type of shoe or clothing in front of the camera, or maybe even in everyday life, that could be called product placement or embedded advertising. According to BalanceCareers.com, Man of Steel was a huge hit, spawning Batman vs. Superman and Dawn of Justice, and helped rebuild the Justice League franchise. It took over $160 million from product placement. If you look close, over 100 global brands paid to somehow be seen in the Superman mega hit. The art to good product placement, though, is that the product fits right into the show. The best product placement is when it doesn't seem like a commercial at all. Oh, sorry. Let me get the door. I'll be right back. Thanks for waiting for me, guys. I just ordered some pizza from The Chameleon. Oh gosh, I love The Chameleon's pizza. Delicious. Over to you, Omer.
What a coincidence, Larkin. Because I just happen to be eating pizza from the Chameleon too. It's that funny. Product placement can be really effective to make sure that people actually see the product and the brand. Did you know that Ford paid around $14 million to drive a Ford automobile in Casino Royale, and it was only on screen for 3 minutes? If you do the math, that's $78,000 per second. That would make for a lot of pizza from the Chameleon.
Allow me to remind you, Omer, good product placement is supposed to be subtle. Over to you, Thaddeus.
Oh, sorry, Larkin. I don't have a segment for today. I just wanted to eat some pizza from Chameleon.
Okay. Anyways, here's today's weather. It's partly pizza today. Partly cloudy today with a choice of pepperoni, with a chance of cloudy skies with a little bit of cheese. Cheese? Did I say cheese? I meant with a little bit of sunshine. We look forward to a wonderful Saturday with temperatures hitting 75 degrees. Over to you, Omer, with the word of the day.
Sorry, Larkin, but I don't think that I can do the word of the day right now. I'm just enjoying this pizza too much.
We know money can't buy love or friendship, but it would mean the world to us if you became Happen's BFF. BFF, of course, stands for best friend forever, but here at Happen, it also means a little something else. Business, family, and friend. All you need to do to become a BFF supporter is make a small donation. Just go to happening.org and click on the donate link. We thank all past, present, and future BFF donators.
Today's word of the day is advocate. It's spelled Advocate. It means one who supports or promotes the interest of a cause or group. We've had fun with our product placement today from the Chameleon. But, on a serious note, we really want to thank the owners and staff of the Chameleon for always being an advocate of Happen. From sponsoring Happen Karaoke Night to being a monthly business donor, the Chameleon has always been there as a supporter of Happen way before as well as during this crisis. And a message to all of the families that have taken part in Happen activities in the past: a lot of Happen activities would not have been possible without their support. So I encourage you to shop local and order a pizza or other food from the Chameleon menu, because we're all in this together, and one of the best ways to support Happen is to support our sponsors.
John Hebenstreet is a Cincinnati sculptor and is in fact creating his latest sculpture right here in Northside and Happen's Make It Space on Chase Avenue. The Make It Space window is chock full of information so that you can read about John and the project he's working on. Thank you so much, John, for being on KMNH.
Thanks, Larkin, for having me on the show. I'm glad to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about the overall project and what you're working on completing?
I am working with the Cincinnati Parks to develop a statue of Ezra Charles, which will go in Laurel Park on Ezra Charles Drive in the West End, and we hope to unveil it somewhere in 2021.
Why is this project so special to you?
This project is special to me because a statue of Ezra Charles celebrates what I believe is a significant part of Cincinnati's West End history. Ezra Charles is from the West End, and he used to train in the West End, and he was more than just a boxer to me and to many other Cincinnatians who know his history.
So tell us, how did your career get started?
I got started with sculpting when I was very young. I started sculpting when I was about 10 years old, and my mother would sculpt with a lot of other local artists, and she would bring me along and I would work in clay and just kind of do my own thing, and that's where it started. And then later I went to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh and took sculpting classes there, and after that came home to Cincinnati again, and I worked as an assistant to a freelance sculptor for Kenner Toys and did that for a little while. And after that, I started sculpting portraits just for fun, and it led to interested parties commissioning me to do work for them. And my first sculpture in Cincinnati was a portrait of Theodore Berry, which is in the Freedom Park downtown, followed by a sculpture I did of a monk, which is at the corner of St. Gregory and Pavilion in Mount Adams. After I did the monk in Mount Adams, I was introduced to a man by the name of Ike Belk, who was from North Carolina, and he used to be part owner of I think it was a clothing store, or it was a store chain in the Carolinas with his siblings, and he sold all of his shares to his brothers and sisters, and started to donate sculpture and buildings and all kinds of things to different universities. And somehow or another, my mother had a client. My mother is also an artist. She's a portrait painter. She had a friend who coincidentally lived next door to him in Florida, and he was looking for a sculptor to do a portrait of the president of Presbyterian College in Clinton, South Carolina. So when my mother got wind of that situation, she passed it on to me, and I showed him the work that I had recently done, and he hired me on the spot to do this job for him, which turned into another job, which was to do the founder of that university, which was, his name is William Plummer Jacobs, and they wanted a 8-foot tall statue of him. So that was my first, actually it wasn't my first big statue. The monk in Mount Adams was my first full-size figure. This would be my first over life-size sculpture. And Mr. Belk was pleased with both of the jobs that I did for him, and he asked me to quote 4 portraits for the University of Charlotte, North Carolina, to do all of their chancellors, which I did. And then that job led to another job and another job. So I started doing portraits for different universities. I did one for Appalachian State University of their chancellor, Kenneth Peacock. And I did a portrait of the president, I believe, of Furman University, which was in South Carolina. So I did quite a bit of work for Mr. Belk. And then he happened to have, he also sat on the bank commission for North Carolina with Mr. Cecil. Mr. Cecil is the grandson of George Vanderbilt, and the Vanderbilt family was looking for a statue of George Vanderbilt to go in the Biltmore Farms, which was a real estate venture. Because of George Vanderbilt, who built the Biltmore estate in Asheville, North Carolina, he owned 75,000 acres, I believe, and donated a significant amount of it to North Carolina, which became Pisgah National Forest. The rest of it was the property that the house currently sits on, and a dairy farm. And the dairy later became this real estate venture, and they wanted to place a statue of George Vanderbilt within the confines of that project. So I coincidentally happened to be working for Mr. Belk when this need arose, and so they contacted me and asked me to quote a statue of George Vanderbilt, which would be 7.5 feet tall. So I immediately began work on that, and that was my next commission. And I can't remember what year that was. I think it was 2008. And that's when it was, approximately when it was completed. I should go back and say that the monk was completed in 2004, I believe, and I think the sculpture of Theodore Berry at Cincinnati's Freedom Park was 2003. So that's kind of when my official commission, portrait commissioning was in about 2003, and I've been working straight up until now. So following the George Vanderbilt statue, I started to do a little bit more work here in Cincinnati. I did a portrait of Frank Mayfield for the Mayfield Clinic. I did a sculpture it was a relief sculpture that's about 6 feet wide of a 1936 or 39 Maybach for Montgomery Mercedes, which used to be in their boardroom. It may still be there. And after that, I was commissioned to do a portrait for Purdue University of their chancellor, who was getting ready to retire. And that was actually the first female sculpture that I've ever gotten to do. It's unusual. I haven't had the opportunity to do much variety. It seems like I'm doing a lot of guys in suits. And then another thing that was a lot of fun was, I'm not sure what the first year, I think it was 2005, I went out to visit a friend in California, and he lived in Los Angeles, and I play a little bit of guitar, and he is a guitar player as well. And I had created a sculpture as a gift for him of Jimi Hendrix. And it was just the head and shoulders, and it was rather small. And I thought I would bring it out to give it to him for his birthday. So my wife and I drove out to visit, and we got there at a time when he wasn't home. He knew we were coming, but he wasn't home. So he said we could go hang out at Guitar Center, which was on Sunset Boulevard in West Hollywood. And we would go hang out there, and then he would let us know when he was on his way home. So we went to Guitar Center, and on our way into the store, they have a little series of plaques on the outside of the building of musicians who have passed away, like Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin and so on. So we were looking at those sculptures, and my wife encouraged me to talk to the manager of the store to let them know that I do that kind of work, to see if they would be interested in using me to do a few portraits for them. So we went inside, and I had this sculpture of Jimi Hendrix in the trunk of my car. While we were inside, we met the manager of the store, and he invited us up to his office, and we spoke to him for a while about the plaques, and he looked at the portrait that I did, and right off the bat, he asked me what it would cost to do a sculpture of Stevie Ray Vaughan, and he listed a number of other musicians, and before I knew it, I was working for Guitar Center Hollywood, creating sculptures, and I think I've done about a dozen portraits for them, from Muddy Waters to Otis Redding, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Miles Davis, Vic Firth, a dozen of them, Kurt Cobain. And that's been a lot of fun. That's one of those jobs that it's always a pleasure to work with them. So somewhere in there, I think it was about 2008, I got wind that there was going to be Cincinnati was renovating its parks, and they were going to create Smale Riverfront Park. And there was talk of having a Civil War monument at Smale Riverfront Park. In 2009, I began work on 2 statues for Smale Riverfront Park that were part of the Black Brigade Monument. One figure was of P.F. Jones, and the other was Colonel Dixon. And the sculpture depicts P.F. Jones handing a sword to Colonel Dixon. And the fun thing about that was that there was never a photograph of P.F. Jones. There was I believe it was just a single portrait of Colonel Dixon. So everything else had to be fabricated from photographs of old clothes and and shoes and things like that. So that was fun to do that research. But coincidentally, at the time, and I don't know where it is now, the Freedom Center actually owned, or not owned, they were holding for somebody the sword that was presented to Colonel Dixon. So I got to go to the Freedom Center and actually look at the sword that was going to be held by these two figures that I was sculpting. So the only two things I had to really draw from, or had to draw from, to make these statues was the portrait of Colonel Dixon and the sword. So everything else was up to me, and that made it a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to do it.
How does it feel to have your work be a part of Cincinnati history forever?
It's a really good feeling to know that my artwork is going to be a part of Cincinnati's history in the future. It's also a little daunting because some of my favorite sculptors have already done work here in Cincinnati, and it's they're like who I'm living up to, and I'm still learning as I'm doing each and every project. But no, it's a great feeling to know that you've done something that lots and lots of people will get to look at it and enjoy, and it's a great feeling.
What advice do you give young artists, and maybe even more specifically, young sculptors?
Well, the first thing I would say is not to take the arts too seriously. I think, which I tend to do. I'm still working on that. You never want to take yourself too seriously. You want to keep it fun, and you should always you should always feel like you're learning something. If you're not learning, you might be inclined to think that you're doing something wrong at that point. You should always be learning. The other one thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is that I don't want people to think that I am a sculptor of objects. I like to think that I'm doing more than just copying, Ezra Charles or whoever the subject matter might be. I'm designing as I work through everything from the foot to the knee, the whole figure, the head, the face. It's all something I'm designing. It's not just copying, and so there's a lot at work there, and it takes a long time to get to the point where you're doing that well. And I still think I'm working on it. So there's a lot of learning. You're always learning. And then the other thing is to find what you really like to do. I mean, if you want to get into the arts, what is it that you really enjoy? Do you enjoy sculpting animals or drawing animals? Do you enjoy painting portraits? Do you enjoy just designing shapes? And you want to find what you love. You'll learn faster that way. You'll progress faster, and you'll have more fun. And when you have fun doing what you do, that translates to the people who view your work or potentially buy your work. So, have fun, and pay attention to what your surroundings are. You're going to learn the most as an artist from the world around you. If you're into drawing dogs and birds and whatever it is, you want to look at those things. You want to examine those things. If you are into drawing people, you want to examine those things. If you are into architecture, look at architecture. You want to look at the world around you, and have fun and enjoy what you're doing. And that's probably the best advice I can give any young artist, I would say.
How can people help support this project?
If you'd like to help fund the statue of Ezra Charles, you can go to our GoFundMe page.
Well, thank you so much for being on KMNH.
Thank you, Larkin, for having me on the show. It was a pleasure.
Monday is Memorial Day, and we here at KMNH will be celebrating with our families. We will be back on Tuesday, so tune in then for another episode of KMNH, Kids Making the News Happen.